Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Unlocking Oracle Apex Potential, Integrating Generative AI and Streamlining Workflows. My name is Nikki Chen. I'm a Marketing Event Manager for the Developer Initiative here at Oracle. Today, we're excited to explore new workflow solutions in Oracle Apex with you. Just a quick note, we'll be sending the session recording to the same email address used for today's event. If you have any questions during the webinar, please drop them in the chat or in the Q&A area, and we'll be ready to answer them. We have also set up a Slack channel, Cloud Coaching North America, in our developer workspace that you can access at the QR code or at the link on the screen. This channel will remain open after the event for you to contact us directly if you have any questions. Today's webinar will be presented by Shane Jawardine, a cloud engineer. Without further ado, I'll pass it to Shane.
And so welcome everyone. For today's agenda, we have a ton of content, so we'll try to move through it fairly quickly in the next hour or so. And then we'll start with a quick overview of Oracle Apex for those of you who aren't familiar. We'll talk a little bit about the workflows component that was released here in fall of last year at 23.2. And then we'll cover the Cohere Generative AI services, which is what we're going to use to actually generate the text from our Oracle Apex application that we'll be building together. And so when we go into the demo, I've done a little bit of pre-work in terms of setting up a few sample pages just so that we can save ourselves some time. But we'll go through and we will build the majority of it together. And then we will circle back to the presentation. We'll talk a little bit about what Code Innovate is and how you can use Code Innovate to build out and solve business processes or challenges that you currently have today by partnering with our team here at Oracle. And finally, we'll wrap with a quick Q&A. During the session, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. We have a few people that are looking at the chat. They'll do their best to answer the questions. If not, we will save them for the end where we can cover them maybe in a bit more detail. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So what is Oracle Apex, right? It's a user-friendly development platform that'll help you to create those web applications without the typical extensive coding that you may be used to. And so you can easily work with database tables, views, PL/SQL, and overall, it just simplifies the process with declarative features and minimal coding, right? And so it's a very versatile tool for creating both desktop and mobile applications that integrates directly with the Oracle database. So it enables you to design, develop, and launch these like responsive applications, either hosted on-prem or in the cloud. And with Apex, you can craft a variety of components, such as different types of interactive reports, forms, charts, calendars, and more that directly leverage the data directly in your database, right? However, your database isn't the only data source that you can use for your Apex web application. There's actually a couple of different sources that you can pull data from. Of course, you do have your local PL/SQL and SQL from your data source. You can also connect Apex with external web services. So those are your RESTful APIs or your SOAP-based web services there you see at the top right. And this means you can pull data in from various online sources directly into your application, or you can choose to synchronize them to a local table if that makes more sense for that endpoint. You also have typical database links. So those are your SQLnet connections there you see at the bottom right. And lastly, Apex makes it easy to connect to remote Oracle databases using REST-enabled SQL. So this differs a bit from your traditional database link because you can use REST-enabled SQL as your data source directly in your application. So it's making a query to a remote database in order to render that region on your page. So a little bit about the workflows component that was recently brought to the product. So it comes with a number of features for setting up and automating different business processes in your application. For now, you can create step-by-step tasks, approvals, and notifications from right within the app. And it's a new way of keeping things organized and making sure that everyone's on the same page and working together on these projects while you're developing. And so it's like setting up automated processes for task and information flow from within your application. So that's from the front end to the back end to the database to task definitions, all of which we're going to take a look at today. And it really helps to streamline how things get done by defining who does what and when they do it. And it gives you different tools like the visual designer to create these workflows, a console to monitor and manage them, and then an engine that will make them run more smoothly. And you can design the workflows visually, activate and monitor them using the new admin console, and trigger the workflows using a typical page process within the application page itself. And it's designed to be pretty straightforward and simple. It's easy to pick up, so you don't need to be an expert in different processes to get started. It's pretty flexible and customizable. You can add your own activities like different tasks or actions based on plugins that you may want to create, which will allow you to tailor your application workflow even further for your own business. And you're able to integrate with the development environment seamlessly, right? So it's through the page processing. It's a natural extension of the developers who are already familiar with the page designer that's available in Apex. Lastly, at the bottom there, Apex Workflows is able to leverage Oracle Machine Learning, which helps to bring a intelligence component into the automation process for more advanced workflows and decision. And so for the generative AI service, today we're going to dive into two key models here. These are large language models that are created by Meta and Cohere. And so the two key models will be the Llama 2, which is the 70 billion parameter. It's widely used for both research and commercial applications. And then, of course, you have Cohere Command, which is their flagship model that comes in those two sizes that you see listed there. For today's demo, we will be using Cohere Command. So you'll see in our payload that we're sending out to the REST API endpoint we're about to cover, I will talk about where we specify Cohere Command, and then you can use some of the other models if you so choose to do so. And what does that endpoint look like? So there is a bit of prerequisites in order to make a call to this endpoint. Firstly, authentication, of course. So you will need to generate some OCI API keys, which consist of like a public and a private key, different key details such as like your user OCID, the key fingerprint, the tenancy OCID in the region. Once you have that information generated from your OCI console, you're able to then go into Apex and create web credentials that reflect that information that will help to authorize your Apex environment to make a call to that REST API endpoint. And what that endpoint looks like is listed below. So you have the endpoint and then the actual post request that we'll be using. And then the full endpoint there is listed at the bottom as well. Now, like I mentioned, it is a post request. So we will be sending a request to that endpoint using this payload that you see right here. The important things to note are your compartment ID. Of course, that will be specific to your individual compartment. You have some other parameters like serving mode. In this case, the type is on demand, meaning that'll be invoked for this specific request. Top P, top K are your statistical parameters for like sampling, different strategies for like text generation. So if you're going to try this for yourself or you want to play around with it, you can leave almost all these defaults. The important thing to note is that your prompt there is not only the user prompt that a user will generate. So if they ask you to say something like, tell me about this hotel, you're not sending that prompt alone. We'll have to employ some prompt engineering, which is essentially going to be generating the context of that prompt. So we'll generate basically a blurb that will give all the context of this hotel, all the information as we know it. And the generative AI will use that context and the prompt that the user entered in order to generate an intelligent response back to our users. And so what we're actually sending in that payload is not only the prompts that the user enters, it's the prompt and the context combined into one. And so with that, we can go ahead and jump into our live demo. So what you're seeing now is my Apex workspace. You can see that I have a bunch of sample apps here, but today we're going to get started with our cloud webinar app right here, app 188. And so when we're looking at this application, I've done a bit of pre-work just in order to save us some time based on the short amount of time that we do have together today. So I've created 4 or 5 pages previously, and I'll walk through them together so that we know what our starting point is. And then we can go in and add the rest of the features and functionality that we talked about previously. So the first one is a simple cards region. In this cards region, there's nothing besides a cards region that has data coming from this hotel accommodations table. If I go ahead and duplicate my browser and go to the object browser, I can actually pull up that hotel accommodations table for you so that you can see what that looks like. So it's got many columns, but it has information about our 4 hotels today, as well as a bunch of flags that allude to if they had that amenity or not at that specific hotel. So when we're going through and eventually creating our context for this generative AI prompt, we'll notice that the context will be different based on the respective hotel ID. And that context will be pulling from this table right here. So with that, we can go to page 3. Page 3 has a little bit more information already set up. So there's a few key elements here, which are a button that will help us to open up a form that will actually let the user book a stay at the hotel. There is a submit and a prompt button box where we can have the user enter the prompt that they want, and that will be submitted to the generative AI for a response. You have the response that's coming back. This is the parsed response. The response from the generative AI service is not user-friendly. So when we retrieve the response, we will parse the response and put it into a database column, and then we will return it into this box here. The prompt context is the blurb or the general context about that specific hotel that will help our generative AI service produce a more intelligent response. And then at the bottom, we have a few more items such as the hotel ID, the hotel name, the final prompt, which is going to be a concatenation of the prompt and the prompt context, the response, which is the raw response from the generative AI service, and then the recent prompt ID. And then finally on page 4, we have a typical form in Apex, which will just allow our users to make that booking. On the pre-rendering section, there is just the out-of-the-box initialization of that form. And then on the processing section, there is simply just the processing of that form. So currently, if you submit this form, the only thing that happens is it will insert a record into our bookings table. Now, our bookings table is right here. You can see all the bookings that were there previously, as well as the structure of that table right here. So with that being said, we can go out. I also do have 2 more pages, page 6 and page 7, which are out of the box pages that were created simply from the wizard here. So I use the unified task list in order to generate 2 pages with different context. 1, my task, 1 initiated by me. So the first step we're going to do today is to actually create a REST data source. So we'll go over to share components. We'll go over to REST data sources, and we'll create a brand new one from scratch. And so we'll give it a quick name. And we'll use the exact same endpoint I showed you previously in the PowerPoint, and we'll say next. If there isn't a remote server already created, it will create one for you. In this case, I have one from previous testing, so I can just go ahead and say next. And you will require authentication for this endpoint as well. So I'll pick the credentials I have previously created. If you need help creating those credentials, or you don't know how to generate an API key in your OCI tenancy, there is a lab that I'll direct you to on apex.oracle.com called the AI Vision Apex Lab that walks you through the exact steps on how to generate that API key, set up your web credentials, and then you'll be able to call those web credentials into here. So I'll go ahead and say create REST source manually. I'll click back into it and I'll scroll down. So we have the general operations with that REST data source. For us, we're going to be using a post request. So we're not mapping it to anything, but I'll go ahead and paste the exact same template that I showed you previously in the PowerPoint as well. So you have the same parameter for prompt. I won't scroll all the way up to the top, but you have the prompt here. And this prompt is really going to be the concatenation of the prompt context and the prompt, which will make a bit more sense once we get to that portion of the demo. So I'll go ahead and just say synchronize with body. You can also add the parameter manually, but Apex allows you to synchronize with body, which will just take all the parameters that are defined in your request body template and create operation parameters based on that. I'll go ahead and say apply changes. And we need 2 more parameters as well. These are not specific to the post request, so I'll just add them here at the bottom under parameters. First one's going to be a HTTP header. and that is for the content type, which will be going in, and the value of that, the default value, will be application JSON. So that's a static parameter, and we'll add one more for the response as well. So I'll add a response body. The name of it will also be response, and then I'll say add parameter. So that's all set up. We can now go ahead and just say apply changes. I will navigate back over to my application 188 and go into our bookings page. So this bookings page, once again, is where a user is actually going to be able to ask questions to the generative AI service, retrieve a response, and then eventually be able to make a booking by pulling up that form on page 4. So a few things to get started. The first thing we'll do is we need to set prompt context. And so what I'll do is I will add a process directly here that will take this large query. So we'll just say set prompt context. And this query, it's 100 lines, but a lot of it is just case statements. So it's just checking to see, is that amenity available at this specific location? If it is, output some text. If it's not, output some different text. It's got some placeholders. It's got some case statements. It's got some general text and descriptions. But it's generating this entire paragraph blob, or blurb, I guess, not a blob like as in a database object blob, but just a paragraph where it is being stored into this page item called P3 prompt context. And it's matching based on the hotel ID. So I'll show you what this entire query looks like, but it just generates a paragraph for us. So I'll save that. Then I'll go ahead and go to processing, and I'll create 3 processes. There's 3 we need. The first one is going to be to actually combine the prompt with the prompt context we just created. So I'll just call this one prepare the prompt. And what this code is doing is it is saying the page item P3 final prompt that's on page 3 is the combination of 2 clobs. So it's the context and the context we just created, the question, and the question that the user enters. If the question cannot be answered, please contact the front desk for more info. So it has a default case in case it returns information where there is no context. So we'll say, okay. Then we'll go to and we'll create 2 more. So the next one will be the REST data source. And what we'll do is we'll invoke an API from a REST data source. We'll select the one we just created and select post. In doing so, it's going to automatically call the parameters that we had defined in that REST data source. So if you remember, prompt was the one in the post body request, and response is what's coming out. So in this case, it matched up to P3 prompt, but what we really want is to match to P3 final prompt, which is going to be the combined prompt and context. And then as far as the output, instead of ignoring the output, we'll put the output in the P3 response. Now, again, this P3 response is the raw response from the web source service. And so this isn't what we're displaying to our users. We're just storing it in this hidden page item. And then we're going to create one more page process that will parse the response. And so in order to parse the response, we will use a bit more PL SQL, and we will insert into the prompts table for these columns. Most of them are straightforward, right? Things like app session, hotel ID, the actual prompt the user entered. For the response, we're going to use a subquery to take the information that's available in P3 response, which is the raw data from the API. We're going to parse that response and extract the specific text from it and insert it into the response column in the table. So that's what this bit of code is doing here. And then it's just returning the recent prompt ID so that in case we need to reference it, we can do that later. So we can save all that. Then we'll go ahead and go back to our component layout. And one more thing we need to do is we need to actually return that response that's now being stored in the database table into our P3 response parsed. So I'll do that by creating a source of a query, and that query source will be going into the table, that prompts table, selecting the column response that's the most recent for this hotel, for this app session. So There's probably a few ways to retrieve the record. In this case, I just want to retrieve the most recent one. So this will work. And then we'll also need to make sure that we replace the existing value in the session state. So if they ask multiple questions in a row, it replaces the one that was already there, the response. So finally, we'll go to page 2. Remember, this is our cards page. Currently, as it stands right now, if you click on any of these cards on that page, nothing will happen. So we really just want to link our users to page 3. So I'll just say we want to send them to page 3, and we want to pass in the hotel ID. So I'll save that and run that one more time. So now if I click on, let's say, Sapphire Sands Resorts, it links me to page 3, and I can ask a question below. So I'll ask something like, how many rooms are in the hotel? And so it'll take that, it will generate the prompt context as well, and it will get the response from the API. You can also ask questions such as, what are the best dining options at the hotel? So I'll show you the prompt context here in a second, but there is information about what the dining options are. However, there's no information about what the best dining options are. And so this is going to talk about what the dining options are, although it's not explicitly stating what the best are. It's going to use its general context to generate a meaningful response to our users. So that's great and all. But one interesting thing you can do is actually even ask it questions in other languages. So if I go back to page 3, and for now, I'm going to actually unhide this so that we can see what the prompt context looks like. So I'll save it and I'll refresh this page. Here you can see what the prompt context is looking like. So it has information about the rating, the rooms, the dining options, the amenities, it's all down there. But if we ask it something that explicitly is not stated, right? So previously we asked it what the best dining options are, and there are some information about dining in this paragraph. However, what if we ask it something that's not stated at all? Like what is the check-in time for this hotel? And so again, although it's not stated in the context, it tells you that check-in times vary by the end of the day. They're not decided till the day of close to the date check-in itself. For immediate answers, please contact our front desk. So it's able to still give a response, even though, this information about check-in times varying and we aren't decided until the date of check-in itself is not specifically stated. And what I was saying earlier about the questions in other languages is if we ask a question in Spanish that translates to what are the different rooms in this hotel, right? And what are my options for dining once I come and stay there? We can do something very similar. So although the question is in Spanish and the prompt context is in English, the reply comes in English. It's able to understand and generate still a meaningful response to our users. So that is the generative AI service. As a quick recap, what we did is we created 3 processes. 1, to prepare the prompt, which is combining the prompt and the context. 2 is to create a REST data source and call it here from the page where we are sending the prompt and retrieving the response. And 3 is to parse that actual response, put it in a column in the table, and then retrieve it into this page item here. And so now we can move on to our actual workflow process. So for our workflow, the first thing we want to do is go ahead and create a task definition. So we'll go down here, we will create a task definition. We will call it confirm booking. And for the subject, I will give it a name of confirm booking for the booking ID and the hotel name. Now, these are, of course, substitution strings. Once this is in a runtime, it will grab what the booking ID should be and the hotel name from the workflow, and it will insert it into the subject for that booking task. Finally, I'll give it a potential owner of Bo. Bo is just a sample user we'll use, so I'll just say create. In our task definition page, you'll see Bo is again defined down here. We have our subject down here. We will need a task details page. This task details page is used so that the approver or approved or multiple approvers can see what the details of the task is, what information, what the check-in date, checkout date is, and they're able to make an appropriate approval or rejection based on that information. So we'll just say create task detail page on page 5, and it'll do that automatically for us. So this is the details page URL. And then on our next step, we'll actually go back and start creating our workflow, right? So on our workflow, we don't have anything created just yet, but we'll go ahead and we'll create one together from scratch. I'll delete the base activity here and just drag this over. This play button is going to be the start, and the square is going to be the end of the workflow. So I'll just drag out the end quite a bit so that I have some space to work with. And I'll zoom out so that we can see more of the space here. Maybe a little bit too far. We'll drag that back in a bit. Okay. So I'll give it a quick name. So we'll call this one hotel booking. Its title can be a booking request workflow for the hotel name. So again, using a substitution string from the workflow. And then here's the hotel name. Like that. Next, we need to add some parameters here. These parameters are things that will be populated from the user's form that they're going to fill out, and that's located on page 3. So I'll create a parameter here. And the first one will be booking ID. Then I'll just create a few more to represent all my parameters from my form page. For the purposes of this, we may not use them all. So I'll list them here as if this was going to be fully built out. And these are probably things that we'll need in the future. So something like, check-in date, checkout date could definitely be useful. Although we may not actually get to it in this quick demo here. So I'll also do a contact email. This contact email is the email address that the user is going to enter when they're filling out the form. And so that's where we'll send their actual email confirmations. So I'll do hotel ID and then hotel name as well. Now for hotel ID, it's a number in the table. And same with check-in and checkout date. Those are actually just timestamps in the table. So I'll save all that. And for our first task, we actually just want to send out a booking received email. So this will let our users know that their booking has been received and we're reviewing it. I'll copy that same thing down to the subject, and the to is going to be a substitution string to a contact email. Again, this contact email is referencing this contact email, which is going to be populated from the form our users are going to fill out. And then for the text, for now, I'll just use a placeholder because I'm going to be using HTML for this. So this HTML block is a received booking email. It has some list. It has a link to the actual application. And I'll show you what the output of this email looks like by the end when it gets sent to my actual inbox. And I'll say send immediately. The next thing I want to do is drag a human create task over here. So again, this will be for a human to confirm the booking. We'll select our previous definition of booking confirmation. And as soon as we drag this human task over here, we get 2 variables, that is approver and task outcome. These are created, and variables differ from parameters in the way that variables will be updated and manipulated throughout your workflow, while parameters are items that are more static during the processing of this workflow. And so what we'll do is we will use these task outcome and approver to determine if the user approved or rejected the task. And so we'll just note that down here. So here we'll put task outcome as the outcome and the owner as the approver. Finally, we'll need a switch. This switch will help us determine which path to take after the user makes their decision. So this will be confirm booking. And we want to evaluate it based on a workflow variable, and that workflow variable being the same task outcome. So after they approve this task, we'll send out a confirmation email. Now this confirmation email will be similar to the booking received email. So we'll just do a confirm confirmation email. This will be going to the contact email, and we'll just give a quick subject. Again, I'll use a placeholder for the body text, and I will use mainly HTML for the actual text here. So again, similar to before, just a bit of different information styling on this so we can see the difference. Now, we need to decide how to tell the workflow that after they accept to go this way, and after they reject, we need to actually go this way. And we're going to do that by just saying this will be our approval line, and the condition will be is equal to approval. And this condition, it's evaluating this workflow variable. So it's checking what the workflow variable is, and based on that, it's taking the path. So if the workflow variable is equal to approve, we'll send them this way. If the workflow variable is equal to rejected, we'll send them this way. And so here we'll just say rejected. And we'll clean this up just a bit like that. And for the confirmation email, we can actually copy some of these items over. Booking rejected. And I have a different set of HTML for the rejection email as well. Again, this is just styling mainly. You could do HTML, you could do body, you can even attach your own attachments to this email, but we'll see what these emails look like in a bit. Now, the final step is to execute code. When a user fills out that form, in the table, it's updated, the booking status is received. So once it's confirmed, we of course want to change it to confirmed. If it's rejected, we want to change it to rejected. So here we'll say update the booking table to confirmed. And the code for that is pretty straightforward. It's just a bit of code that will do a update statement to that hotel booking table and set the status to confirmed where the booking IDs match. So we'll say okay to that. And we can start connecting all these. So we'll connect that there. We'll connect that to the end. And then we can even duplicate this task to make our lives a bit simpler. So here, what we're doing is we are just borrowing the update booking table status. And this one, of course, is going to be rejected. And for the PL SQL code, we can just quickly change all the places where it says confirmed to rejected, and we'll save that as well. And so now that we have that sorted, we'll connect this final line right here, and it's all good to go. So to recap, we have our booking received email that will come to my personal inbox because that's the email address I'll put down. We have a task that's going to our sample user Bo that will make a decision on that task. Based on that decision, they'll take a switch, which will, if they're approved, which is the default status, right? It'll go to the confirmation email and update the booking status respectively. If it's rejected, based on the task outcome variable, it will get a rejection email and they'll get a note about the task being rejected. So we'll save all that and we will navigate back over to our actual workflow here. What we'll do is we will go to page 4. And again, here on page 4 processing, we already have the pre-built tasks. So what this task is doing, or this process, is it is inserting a record into the table, just like any form in Oracle Apex. And so we'll create our own that will we'll call it workflow. So it's basically going to kick off the workflow. And we'll choose workflow. We'll choose the definition that we just created together. And it is going to bring in all the parameters that we had predefined in our workflow. So I'll need to go in one by one and match them or map them up to a page item. So for booking ID, it will be RP for booking ID. For check-in date, it will be check-in date, and so on. So I'll just match this up here in just a second. And once that's sorted, I'll actually just go in here and add a quick success message so that we know that the booking is working. We know the workflow is being kicked off, and we know what our booking ID is. That way, together we can kind of test and see where that bookings went to and track it. So I'll just say request submitted. Your booking ID is, and we'll just call a substitution string for booking ID. So when this goes to the table to insert that record, booking ID does not exist yet, right? The booking ID is a default primary key that's generated on insert. But that's what this quick toggle here does. Return primary keys after insert, takes the record that was just inserted and sends the primary key back into booking ID, which allows us to really save a lot of time in terms of development. So with that being done, we can actually go in and test the whole thing. So we'll kind of start from the beginning here. And keep in mind, I'm using my development user. So we'll go into Sunset Haven Resort and Spa. We test out the questions, but again, you can ask any questions that the user wants to, and they'll get their response there. We can say book a stay at the Sunset Haven Resort and Spa. It looks like it's loading, which leads me to believe that I did not send this button to page forward quite yet. So to do so, I'll say quick edit. I will click on that top right region. And sure enough, this book hotel is set to submit the page when in reality, we want to direct it to page 4. And in directing it, I will again send over the hotel ID and the hotel name. You could always pull the hotel ID from the hotel name. The hotel name from the hotel ID. I had that backwards. But you can also send them over if they're available on both pages. So let's try it again. Let's open this up. And of course, we get our booking. Here's our contact email, which is my personal email address. I'll make a quick booking for, let's say, tomorrow and check out on the 30th. And we'll put a quick phone number down with no accommodations. And I'll say submit request. So we get a booking ID of 65. While I'm here, I'll actually go ahead and create another booking, let's say at the Tranquil Retreat Resort and Spa. And you'll see here at a different hotel, the context is, of course, specific to that hotel. So I'll make another booking for 2 in their garden retreat rooms. We'll check in at the end of the month and we'll check out at the end of May. And for that one, our booking ID is 66. So as the development user still, I can go to the initiated by me, and you can see the 2 tasks there. Confirm booking 65 for Sunset Haven, 66 for Tranquil Retreat Resort and Spa. Now, if I go to our hotel booking page and I just give it a quick refresh, this is our actual database table, right? And so if I look at those booking IDs for 66 and 67, I think, oh, there, they just came through. So 65 and 66, we will see that they both have a status of received right here in the booking status, and the guest 8 and 2 like we entered. So we can now continue with the workflow. So now these are both assigned to Bo. I can click on them. It'll pull me up the details, but there's no option to, of course, accept because it's not assigned to me. So I'll just do a quick sign out. I'll sign in with Bo. And on this one, if I go to initiated by me, there's not going to be anything because the task, I didn't create them, but instead they're going to be under waiting on me. So my tasks. So here we have the 2 same bookings, 65 and 66. If we go to 65, we can see the details. Like right now, there is no details because we didn't actually enter details, but usually we have something like check-in date, checkout date, number of guests, all the details that the user entered. But you can see that was created 109 seconds ago. And so for this first one, I'll actually go ahead and reject the task. And so I'll just say task rejected. And for the second one, for 66 at Tranquil Retreat Resort and Spa, I will go ahead and approve that task. Now what we can do is we can go to our database table. We can give it a quick refresh. And for 65 and 66, right here in the middle, we will see that they are respectively adjusted to rejected and confirmed, which means that our update code, execute code in our workflow is currently working. The last thing I'll do is we entered 3 emails. So there's one for received, confirmed, and rejected. So if that's all working, I should have received 4 emails, two receiving emails, 2 rejection emails. So I'll go ahead and just pull up my email inbox here. And what I'll do is I will stop my share. Well, I'll share just my new window. So I'll share this other desktop. And you'll be able to see that I have first the booking received email that came through. This is what it looks like for the Sunset Haven Resort and Spa. That is the booking confirmation email. This is the second booking received email. So this is for the Tranquil Retreat and Spa. And finally, we have the booking rejected email. So you can see here, the received emails were sent at 2:42 p.m. And then there was a bit of time where I was explaining a few other things. And we, let's see here. And we got to the booking confirmation and booking rejected email. So once again, here's the booking received, the second booking received, the booking rejected, and the confirmation booking rejected. So that leads us to the workflow is now working, the emails are coming through, the database tables are being updated, and it's all being controlled by that workflow process that we created together. So we created that workflow process, and then we created a page process that would help connect the two, the front end to that workflow process. And so lastly, I'm actually going to switch back to our presentation here for just a moment, where I will talk a little bit about Code Innovate and how you can use Code Innovate to kind of solve some of your business challenges or problems. And so what Code Innovate is it is a program that we like to discuss and bring up the analogy of Legoland. And so when we're talking about Code Innovate, we use this example about when our manager went to Legoland with his kids, as you can see in the photos. And during his visit, his children were given this bag of disassembled Lego pieces, but they weren't given any particular instructions to follow, right? You should build this or you should complete this. Instead, folks in the green shirts, referred to as master builders, were able to assist with whatever building project that you wanted to create. So on this particular day, they created the art of brick interlocking and how to create these smooth-faced penguins with the earmuffs you see here at the bottom. And we tell that story because in its simplest form, that's what Code Innovate is. It's a way for the customer to give us a use case that they want to build or explore. And over the course of a week, it's 5 days for 4 hours a day. So it's a 20-hour work week. Instead of Oracle building it for them, like we would do in a typical POC, it's Oracle building it with you. So you get to pick the use case and we'll assign the right engineers to help you complete that use case. And so all the development that you're working on, all the IP, the resources, they all belong to you during the Code Innovate and post Code Innovate. But it's really about helping you build a prototype or a minimum viable product that the team can then take back to management and then use as a starting point for your future development. And so how it works is that we work together to kind of understand your use case and what other technology or requirements we may need in order to complete the prototype. And since it's you as the customer building it and us from Oracle engineers supporting and direct you on how to build it, where to go, how to solve problems, debugging, right? Everything you expect to see in a typical development sprint. There's a rapid knowledge share, right? We get to teach you a lot about the tool or product in the process of building out your actual use case or solving your business problem. And so finally, by the end of the week, we aim to have a first pass prototype of your use case that then you can take as a starting point for your future development. And so today's example was actually inspired and created, I guess, off of a previous Code Innovate that we worked with the customer. In that case, they had a very old business process that was modernized by using the Apex workflow component that we talked about today. But Innovate is not specific to Apex. We work with many tools, many products, many services under the Oracle PaaS and IaaS umbrellas. And so things like block storage, integration cloud, machine learning, analytics cloud, we constantly do Innovates that revolve around all these tools. So I highly encourage you, if this is something that you're interested in or just want to learn a bit more, you can send an email to codeinnovate_us_group at oracle.com. You can also put your emails directly in the chat and we will collect them and reach out to you. And we'll just start off with a simple discussion about what your use case is, what you're trying to achieve, and how together, we can work as a development team to solve that problem.